The small town was unusually busy that afternoon. Two black cars slowly drove down the quiet street near the apartment building. Inside the first car, a man in a dark suit looked at a photo on his tablet, showed a familiar face, Taeyong. He spoke calmly to the driver. Stop here. The car parked near the old apartment building. The man stepped out and looked around carefully. This is the last location where his phone signal appeared. The driver frowned. You think he's really hiding in a place like this? The man replied quietly. When a powerful people disappear, they always hide in the last place anyone would expect. Meanwhile, inside apartment 302, Taeyong sat by the window, reading a book. For the first time in years, his life felt peaceful. But suddenly, bang, the door opened again. Taeyong did not even look up. You really need to start knocking. Kimara walked in, carrying her laptop and looking stressed. Bad news. Taeyong raised an eyebrow. What happened? Ara dropped onto the chair dramatically. The producers cancelled my meeting. Taeyong frowned slightly. Why? Ara sighed. He said my drama is too risky. Taeyong leaned back. Risky? Ara nodded. Because it exposes corruption inside big corporations. Taeyong almost laughed. That's the point of your story. Ara groaned. I know. She opened her laptop and showed him the script. They said if I want the drama to be produced, I need to make the villain less powerful. Taeyong looked at the screen. So they want you to protect the receivers. Ara slammed the laptop shut. Exactly. She looked angry now. They think money can control everything. Taeyong stayed silent because he knew the truth. Sometimes it could. Ara suddenly stood up. I'm not changing my story. Taeyong looked up. You are sure? Ara nodded firmly. My dad lost everything because of the people like that. Her voice softened slightly. I'm not letting them win. For a moment, Taeyong felt something strange in his chest. Respect. Ara was fearless when she had nothing. But before Taeyong could say anything, his phone vibrated. He froze. Almost no one had this number. He, al- he slowly looked at the screen. Unknown caller. Toward the window and answered quietly. Yes. A familiar voice spoke from the other side. Sir, we found you. Taeyong's expression changed instantly. It was his former assistant. Reporters and private investigators are searching the entire region. Taeyong looked outside, and that's when he saw them. Two black cars parked near the building. Men in suits stepping out. His location had been discovered. Sir, the assistant continues nervously. You need to leave immediately. Taeyong ended the call slowly. Ara noticed his serious expressions. What's wrong? Taeyong stayed silent for a moment. Then he spoke calmly. I might need to go somewhere for a while. Ara frowned. What? Taeyong looked at the apartment. For the past few weeks, the small place had felt strangely comforting. But now the world was catching up to him again. Outside, the men in suits started walking toward the building entrance. Ara walked to the window. Why are there so many fancy cars outside? Taeyong's eyes darkened slightly. They are looking for someone. Ara turned to him curiously. Who? Taeyong looked at her. For the first time, he almost told the truth. But then he simply said, someone who does not want to be found. Ara shrugged. Sounds dramatic. Then she grabbed her bag. Anyway, I am going back to cafe to work on my script. She walked toward the door. Try not to burn the building down while I am gone. The door closed behind her. Taeyong stood in silence. Outside, the men in suits had already entered the building, slowly climbing the stairs, coming closer, step by step. Taeyong looked at the door. For years, he had faced billion-dollar corporate battles without fear. But now, something felt different. Because if those men opened that door, Kimara would discover the truth. The quiet man next door was not unemployed. He was not poor. He was not ordinary. He was the missing billionaire CEO that all of the Korea was searching for. And once she knew that, everything between them would change. The footsteps on the stairs were getting closer, slow, heavy, deliberate. Inside apartment 302, Taeyong stood completely still. For years, he had faced hostile takeovers, ruthless investors, and political pressure without fear. But this situation was different because this time someone innocent could get hurt. Kimara. He looked toward the door. The men in suits were now on the second floor. One more flight of stairs. His phone vibrated again. A text message from his former assistant. They are investigators hired by the board. If they find you, they will force you back to Seoul. Taeyong exhaled slowly. Of course they would. The board knew something important. Taeyong had documents, evidence that could expose corruption inside the company. If he returned publicly, everything could collapse. Then, beep, his phone rang loudly. The sudden sound echoed through the quiet apartment. Taeyong cursed under his breath. Outside the door, footsteps stopped. One of the men spoke. Did you hear that? Another voice replied, yeah, apartment 302. Taeyong immediately silenced the phone, but it was already too late. Knock knock, a calm but firm voice came from outside. Hello, building inspection. Taeyong almost smiled. That's a terrible lie. But the man knocked again, louder this time. Sir, please open the door. Taeyong looked around the apartment. There was no back exit, no fire escape, no way out. The handle started turning slowly. The door was not locked properly. Taeyong stepped forward, but suddenly another voice shouted from the hallway. Hey! The investigator stopped. Standing at the end of the hallway was Kim Ara. She held two iced coffees and looked extremely suspicious. What are you doing here? The man turned toward her. One of them spoke politely. We are looking for someone. Ara frowned. In my building? The man showed her the photo on his phone. Taeyong's face. Ara looked at it carefully. Then she laughed. You are kidding, right? The investigators looked confused. Ara pointed at apartment 302. The guy who lives there? The man nodded slightly. Yes. Ara burst out laughing again. That's impossible. Why? Ara shrugged. He can't even cook ramen. The investigators exchanged confused looks. Ara continued casually. He's unemployed. Quite weird. Then she grinned. And definitely not a billionaire. Inside the apartment, Taeyong rubbed his forehead. That's one way to describe me. The investigators hesitated. Finally, one of them said, "Thank you for your time." They turned and started walking downstairs again. Ara watched them leave. Then she walked toward Taeyong's door. She knocked lightly. "Hey, Raman Bernard." Taeyong opened the door slowly. Ara handed him the iced coffee. "You owe me for saving you." Taeyong raised an eyebrow. "Saving me?" Ara nodded proudly. "Those weird guys were looking for someone." She pointed at his face. "And the guy in their photo looked a little like you." Taeyong stayed calm. "Oh." Ara squinted suspiciously. "Actually." She stepped closer. "Now that I think about it." Taeyong felt a rare moment of tension. Ara leaned in and stared directly at his face. Her eyes scanned every detail. Then she suddenly grabbed his chin and turned his head toward the light. Taeyong froze. Ara looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped back. "Nah." Taeyong raised an eyebrow. "What?" Ara shrugged. The guy in the photo looked richer. Taeyong almost laughed. Ara walked inside the apartment and sat down cosily. "Anyway, I had an idea for my drama." Taeyong leaned against the wall. "What kind of idea?" Ara opened her laptop excitedly. "What if the villain CEO suddenly disappears?" Taeyong smiled slightly, and Ara's eyes sparkled. "And he hides somewhere unexpected." Taeyong crossed his arms. "Like where?" Ara pointed around the tiny apartment. "Somewhere like this." Taeyong looked around slowly. A small town, a quiet apartment, nobody recognizing him. Ara nodded proudly. "Exactly." Then she looked up at him and laughed. "Imagine if that billionaire CEO was secretly living next door." Taeyong stared at her for a moment. Neither of them spoke. Ara suddenly shook her head. "Anyway, that would never happen." Taeyong smirked. "Why not?" Ara leaned back confidently. "Because rich CEOs would never survive here." She pointed at the stove. "They would burn ramen on day one." Taeyong laughed quietly. "Fair point." But deep down, he knew something important. Ara was getting closer to the truth. And if she discovered who he really was, she might hate him, because the kind of man she despised the most was exactly who he used to be. Rain began to fall again that evening, soft at first, then heavier, like the sky was hiding something. Inside the small apartment, everything felt unusually quiet, too quiet. Taeyong stood near the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. The events of the afternoon replayed in his mind: the investigators, the questions, the close call. He had been careful for weeks, but now the careful life was starting to break. Across the hallway, a faint light glowed from the neighborhood apartment. The sound of typing echoed softly in the silence. Click, click, click. A story was being written. A story about a powerful man who lost everything. A man who hid behind a simple life. A man with secrets. Taeyong's eyes darkened slightly. Too close. A sudden knock broke the silence. Not loud, not aggressive, just unexpected. Taeyong's Taeyong opened the door. Kimara stood there, but this time she was not loud. She was not smiling. She looked different. Serious. I need to ask you something. Taeyong stepped aside. Come in. The room felt smaller than usual. Ara did not sit. She did not joke. She just stood there holding her phone tightly. I went to the cafe earlier, she said slowly. Taeyong leaned against the wall. And Ara turned the phone screen toward him. On it was a news article, a familiar headline. Missing CEO still not found. Search expands nationwide. Below it, a photo. Clear, sharp, unmistakable. Taeyong, the real Taeyong, not the quiet man in apartment 302. Not the one who burned ramen, but the man in a suit, cold, powerful, untouchable. Ara's voice was quiet now. They are still looking for him. Taeyong did not react, but inside, something shifted. Ara stepped closer. I kept thinking. Her eyes locked onto his. Why does he look like you? Silence, heavy, unavoidable. Taeyong looked at the screen, then back at her for the first time. He did not even an easy answer. Ara's voice softened. You said you worked in a corporate management. Taeyong nodded slightly. Yes. Ara took another step closer, her eyes searching his face. Then how do you explain this? She held the phone higher, closer, too close. Taeyong could see his own past staring back at him. The suits, the power, the life he left behind, the life he destroyed. He exhaled slowly. There are many people who look similar. Ara did not move, did not blink, not like this. The rain outside grew louder, almost like it was filling the silence between them. Ara lowered the phone slightly, but her eyes never left his. Who are you? The question was not loud, but it hit harder than anything else. Taeyong looked at her, really looked at her. For weeks she had been nothing but noise in his quiet life, annoying, loud, unpredictable. But now she was the only person standing between his past and his present. If he told her the truth, everything would change. If he lied, he might lose the only rare thing he had left. He might lose the only real thing he had left. Taeyong stepped closer, just enough to close the distance. Ara did not move, did not step back, did not look away. The rain kept falling. The men kept moving, but inside the small apartment, time felt frozen. Taeyong's voice was calm, controlled. Does it matter? Ara frowned. Of course, it matters. Taeyong's eyes did not leave hers. Would you treat me differently? Ara hesitated just for a second, and that was enough. Taeyong stepped back. The distance returned, just like before. I am still the same person you met. Ara shook her head slowly. No. Her voice was firm now. You are hiding something? Taeyong did not deny it, did not confirm it, just silence. Ara picked up her bag, but she did not leave immediately. She stood at the door, waiting, hoping for him to say something, anything. But Taeyong said nothing. The door opened, then paused. Ara spoke without turning around. If you are lying, her voice was quieter now. I will find out. The door closed. Silence filled the room again. But this time it was not peaceful. Taeyong looked at the rain outside. For the first time since he arrived here, he felt it, the inevitable truth. You were never going to stay hidden forever. Across the hallway, Ara sat in front of her laptop, but she was not typing. She was staring at the screen, at the character she had written. A powerful CEO, a man with secrets, a man hiding behind another life. Slowly, she changed one line in her script. The truth always reveals itself. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she whispered softly, "Who are you really?" And somewhere far away, in a bright lit office in Seoul, a phone rang. A voice answered, "We may have found him." The search was not over. It had just begun. The rain did not stop that night. It only grew heavier, like something was about to break. Inside apartment 301, the lights were still on. The laptop screen glowed in the darkness. Unfinished sentences, half written emotions. A story that suddenly felt too real. Ara stared at the blinking cursor, but her mind was not on the script anymore. It was on him, the way he looked at the photo, the pose before he answered the silence. "You are hiding something." Her own words echoed back at her. She grabbed her phone again, opened the article, zoomed in. The image filled the screen. The image filled the screen. The man in the photo stood tall in a perfectly tailored suit, cold eyes, sharp presence. A man people feared. Ara slowly lowered the phone. Then she looked toward the wall, the one separating her apartment from his. It can't be. But doubt had already taken root. The next morning arrived quietly, too quietly. No loud knocking, no chaotic entrance, no voice calling him ramen burner. Taeyang noticed immediately. He stood in his kitchen, staring at the untouched stove. For the first time, no one came. Across the hallway, Ara stepped out of her apartment. But instead of going to the cafe, she went somewhere else. A small convenience store near the edge of town. Old shelves, flickering lights, and a cashier who noticed everything. Ara approached the counter casually. "Excuse me." The cashier looked up. "Yes?" Ara pulled out her phone, showed the picture. "Have you seen this person around here?" The cashier squinted at the screen, then paused. "Why?" Ara's heart skipped. "So you have seen him?" The cashier hesitated. "Well, someone who looks similar comes here sometimes." Ara's grip tightened on her phone. "When?" "Late night. Buys simple things. Keeps his head down." Ara nodded slowly. "Thank you." She turned to leave, but her steps weren't steady anymore. Later that afternoon, Ara stood outside the apartment building, looking up at the second floor, at his window. Closed, silent, ordinary. But now, it didn't feel ordinary at all. Inside apartment 302, the young stood still. He knew something had changed. No noise, no interruptions, no presence. "She's avoiding me." For some reason, that bothered him more than the investigators. Evening fell slowly. The sky turned deep orange, then dark, and finally, footsteps in the hallway. Taeyang looked toward the door. They stopped, right outside, but no knock came. Just silence, heavy silence.
Then the door opened slightly. Ara stepped in, but this time she didn't smile. She didn't speak immediately. She just walked in slowly and placed something on the table. A plastic bag. Taeyang looked at it. What's this? Ara's voice was calm. Too calm. Open it. Taeyang stepped closer, opened the bag. Inside, a neatly folded piece of fabric. Dark, expensive, familiar. He froze. A suit jacket. His suit jacket. The one he had left behind at the dry cleaner weeks ago. Before disappearing, Taeyang's expression didn't change, but the silence said everything. Ara watched him carefully. I went to the shop this morning. Her voice was steady. They said the owner never came back to pick this up. She stepped closer, and they showed me the receipt. Another pause, longer this time. Ara looked directly into his eyes. No more lies. Taeyang didn't move, didn't speak, didn't look away. Her voice dropped slightly. You are him, aren't you? The question hung in the air, sharp, unavoidable, real. The rain outside started again, soft at first, like before, like the night everything began to fall apart. Taeyang exhaled slowly. For weeks he had hidden, for weeks he had stayed silent, for weeks he had pretended to be someone else. But now there was no space left to run. He picked up the jacket, ran his fingers over the fabric. A life he had left behind. A life that was now standing right in front of him again. Ara didn't move, didn't blink, didn't break eye contact. Waiting for the truth, Taeyang finally spoke. Quiet, calm, honest. Yes, the word was soft, but it changed everything. Ara's breath caught, just slightly, but enough. Taeyang looked at her. I am the person they are looking for. Silence, heavy, unfamiliar, painful. Ara took a step back. Not fast, not dramatic, just instinct, like her world had shifted. You lied to me. Her voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was hurt. Taeyang didn't deny it. Yes, another step back. More distance. More reality. Ara shook her head slowly. I told you I hate people like you. Taeyang's eyes didn't leave hers. I know. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, the truth louder than anything else. Ara grabbed her bag, but this time she didn't joke, didn't smile, didn't look back for long. She stopped at the door. I need time. And then she left. The door closed, and just like that, the simple life the young had built was gone. He stood alone again in the same small apartment, but everything felt different now because this time he wasn't hiding anymore. Across the hallway, Ara leaned against her door, her heart racing, her thoughts spinning, her world shaken. The man she laughed at, the man she cooked for, the man she thought was nothing, was the very person she hated the most. And yet, one question wouldn't leave her mind. Why doesn't it feel that simple?